So welcome to Vegetarian for Healthy Aging with Therapy Gardens and Senior U. Today we are going to talk about the interrelationship of vegetarian diet and aging healthily. So the first thing we're going to talk about is types of vegetarian diets. There are a ton of different vegetarian diets, believe it or not, there's not just one. We'll talk about some of the health benefits and challenges, and there are a ton of health benefits and there are a few challenges, but they're easy to overcome if you know what you're facing. Then I'm going to go through some generic kind of master recipes. There's 3 or 4 of those that are just kind of the basis that you can add your own flavorings to. Then I have some selected recipes from Therapy Gardens that I'm just going to share with you, and I have a handout that I brought. I brought all the recipes for everybody, so I will make a copy of that before I leave. And there might be some handwritten notes on there. I made a couple changes along the way. Then we'll talk about some tips and products. But the first thing, before I really get into some of that, I want to talk about not only the benefits, but I want to talk from a personal perspective. And one of the things that has really struck me is how much of an idiot I was when I was married to a vegetarian, and I picked on her unmercifully and became mad at her for becoming a vegetarian. She actually, we got married, and then after we were married, she became a vegetarian, and I used to tell her it was like a bait and switch. We used to be able to go out to the restaurant and I'd get 2 meals, and then she all of a sudden was a vegetarian and I got 1. So years later, she, as my ex-wife, we're still very friendly, and she was amused to find out that I'm 1 step removed now from being a total vegetarian. And it happened naturally in my case, which is what kind of gave rise to this presentation. So if you have any questions or comments or insults, just throw them right out. But the first thing is, I think we all kind of know the first 4 here. We know that eating a vegetarian diet is going to improve your heart health. We know that saturated fat, which beef and meat has a lot of, is not good for your heart health. We also know that vegetarian diet is if it's nutrient dense, it's low calorie. It's naturally low calorie that way. So that's a great thing. We know it lowers the cancer risk. We know that eating a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, the vitamins, the nutrients, the phytochemicals, I think it's probably general knowledge now. People understand that. You hear people say things like eat the rainbow or eat all different colors of produce to get the different benefits. We know it helps digestive health. That's where we get our fiber. Vegetarian, vegetables and fruits and things like that. And that's where a lot of the fiber in our diet comes from. And by and large, most Americans don't get enough fiber in their diet. So we need to, do better with that. But it's the last one that I find the most interesting. That's not talked about as much. And the reason I started off with my personal kind of experiences with vegetarianism is I have experienced this personally. And I'm not sure exactly when it happened, but I remember saying one day, I was at one of these workshops, and I said to somebody, they said, you seem a little different. And I remember saying, I don't know what it is, but I turned 55 and I'm interested in everything. And all of a sudden, the world is my oyster, and I can't wait to get involved in all these different things. And as soon as I said it, I was like, that sounds really pretentious. And I didn't like how I said it, but I thought about it. And I realized, I was trying to find what was the mechanism, what was the trigger. And I truly believe a lot of it was eliminating red meat from my diet. That was one of the biggest steps I made. I did it about 5 or 6 months ago. I immediately shed a bunch of weight. I took myself off my cholesterol medication. Before I even had quit meat for a week, I said, I can do this. And I just took myself off, and I was fine. I'll tell you more about that towards the end of the presentation. But one thing I learned is as I dropped the red meat, I just went, I might as well drop the pork. Was really, what's the sense? And for the first 2 or 3 months, I ate a ton of chicken. Way more chicken than I should have eaten at any one sitting. But I was trying to kind of make myself feel full and get rid of that protein at every meal kind of mentality that mostly men have. And little by little, it went away. And now days will go by and I'll think, when was the last time I actually ate something that's meat? And 3 and 4 days go by without me eating anything meat-based, without me even realizing anymore. And So to circle it back to enhanced mental clarity, there is no doubt that I feel that increase in energy. Yes?
I think you need to say that a vegetarian diet is not necessarily healthy. You're talking about a plant-based diet.
Thank you. That's a great point that Alex just brought up, that a vegetarian diet can sometimes be not healthy, and you want to say a plant-based diet, which is very interesting.
If you're eating Cheetos.
Yes, and that is definitely, so we're going to address that in a minute, but very interesting. The original title for this presentation was Eat More Plants. That was the original present, and it didn't go over well. No one purchased it. So I started playing around with the name, but you're absolutely right, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but it's a great point, because too many vegetarians fall for that. All they eat is carbohydrates. And, French fries are not, or all they eat is cheese, which is just more fat, All right. So how does it improve mental clarity? This is the thing that I realize that when there's new information and people can sometimes be skeptical about this, particularly, for example, I would not want to give this presentation in Texas, right? If, I would not. People would, people would be naturally skeptical of it, but I think people in general are kind of skeptical of medical claims. So I spent some time really, looking through this. And, here are the reasons, and they're pretty elementary if you think about it. Nutrient rich. Well, we know, again, if you're eating a plant-based diet and you're getting more nutrients than you normally would have. The research there is from Frontiers in Psychology. And by the way, this is all recent research. I try to use things within 5 years. Things change so fast now. And I think that's one of the strengths of Therapy Gardens and Senior U is we help seniors and older adults kind of filter through all this new information that's coming out based on artificial intelligence and new studies and all of that. Better blood sugar regulation. We're seeing a lot of, for example, right along the lines of new research, we're seeing this new research about the meal order. The order that you eat your meal in makes a difference in your blood sugar level. So, for example, if you eat your proteins and your vegetables first and then your carbohydrates at the end of the meal, your resting blood sugar doesn't spike. Your blood sugar doesn't spike as much, and it's about 26% is the difference. So that's really kind of important to think about. Reduced inflammation. This is another one that I lived. One of the reasons I gave up the red meat was I was having this arthritic problem, and first they were saying sciatica, then it was arthritis, then it was, and what I realized was I was overweight and I was not healthy, and I needed to do something about it. So that's where the red meat came in. Improved gut health, very important, especially as we age, because generally speaking, as you age, you eat less. So you have to be more judicious about what you do eat, and you have to get the nutrients that your body needs. And some people need different nutrients than other folks too, so it's important to pay attention to that. And then lastly is your cardiovascular health and your brain function. This improves blood flow. If you're cutting out saturated fats and way over the top proteins and things like that, you are absolutely improving your blood flow to your lungs, your air, your brain, all of it. And that's increasing your mental acuity. All right, so what are the vegetarian diets? So let's look at them, right? And we could parse them down even further than some of these are. I won't do that today. But you have lacto-vegetarians. So they're ones that will eat dairy. So they'll eat cheese. They'll eat products that come from animals. Ovo-vegetarians will only eat eggs. They won't eat anything else. They won't eat meat or anything like that. Which, by the way, eggs, hard-boiled egg is one of the most nutritious things you can eat. One of the best things for you. And then you have the lacto-ovo vegetarians that will eat dairy and eggs. I tend to, in my mind, I put dairy and eggs together anyway, probably because they're just in the same aisle at the grocery store. So then you have a partially plant-based. This is probably me right now. I'm probably in here. So you have a pescatarian that will eat fish. So that was my ex-wife. And that is my ex-wife. She is still with us. She is a pescatarian. She'll eat fish, and even that, her reason for giving up wasn't health related at all. It was for ethical reasons. She didn't want to hurt animals, and fish is one thing that she really struggled with. And then one day I read an article, we were sitting together, it's no wonder why we're divorced. I read an article I said, gee, well look, plants have feelings according to this article. And she's like, what do you want me to starve to death? Now I can't eat anything. So So she does still eat fish, but rarely. I'm kind of in the poultry one, the pollotarian, or pollotarian, I guess you would say it, where I probably eat poultry about twice a week now, I would say. I substitute beans for a lot of my protein. And then you have a flexitarian that will eat a little bit of meat, a little bit of fish, but mostly vegetables. And then you have the stricter ones. So you have the vegans, which are, no animal products at all. A vegan diet can be very, very difficult to follow. Getting easier, still expensive. There's still kind of a lot of, I think, unnecessary uppricing at some of the supermarkets and things. Then you have the raw vegans, and these are people that only eat generally raw vegetables or fruits. Although there are people that eat raw meat too. Macrobiotic, so those are people that will eat grains, vegetables, and occasionally some fish. And those are people that are concerned about nutrients. So they really just they're holding their nose to eat the fish is how I kind of see it. And then you have fruitarians, which is not a healthy diet. I kind of became that without realizing it. I was eating all this fruit. I was eating like 6 servings of fruit a day. And there was one day that I only ate fruit for dinner, and I was like, well, I can't do that forever. But there are diets like that. All right, so some concerns to a vegetarian diet. Obviously, as you get older, nutritional deficiencies, we talked a little bit about that. You need to make sure protein, calcium, those are important things to get. Again, for bone health, vitamin D, get some sun. Vitamin D doesn't process without some sunlight in your life. And this last one is actually, I watched my ex-wife go through this, and all kidding and joking aside, this is a problem. Social isolation for vegetarians. You don't get invited out to eat as much anymore, and when you do, you become resentful because people order these giant entrees and you end up ordering a small appetizer, and then someone inevitably goes, let's split the check 4 ways. And I never really cared, but it would bother my wife. She would come home and be like, I ate a side salad and everyone else had prime rib and I ended up having to kick in, and right then, and then even then she'd come home and be like, and then I contributed to the meat thing, like I was contributing to that meeting, So it can become that. And as you get older, we know that social isolation is very bad for you. It's essentially the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. So it's important to not only, eat properly, eat with people. So there is a little bit of a roadblock to social isolation. However, it's becoming more and more accepted to be a vegetarian. So to offset some of these concerns from the last slide, these are the things you should be eating or having in your life. Some of them are questionable. Some of them I'm still investigating. For example, I am not convinced that almond or oat milk is very good for you. It is still highly processed. It is a highly processed food, and you want to keep that in mind. That said, this is where I say a lot of people are different. The trade-off is sometimes that's the only way you're getting a nutrient, and that's the only type of quote-unquote milk that you'll drink. Well, sometimes you have to kind of balance that out. You can get them fortified with calcium D. That's the whole point there. Tofu, I have a couple slides on tofu. It's another food item that I've come around to recently. It's not my favorite. It wouldn't be the first thing out of my mouth for an order somewhere. However, I do see its benefit, and it does fit in with some dishes, and some people do like it. Chia seeds and flax seeds. Flaxseed is a big one. A lot of people mix that in with their smoothies and things like that. It's a great way to get some of those omega-3s that you might not get if you don't eat fish, for example, if you don't eat a lot of salmon or something.
I put it in my oatmeal a little.
There you go, right in the oatmeal. And some oatmeals you can get it mixed right in. Yeah, you can put it in ice cream. Yeah, it's a very versatile. It has like a nutty flavor, but not an overpoweringly nutty flavor. And then nuts, when my mother was alive, she used to call me a nut magnet, but that was more about the people in my life than actually eating nuts. But really, we actually, we don't eat enough nuts in this country. And, one of the things, I was thrilled, and I just found it last night, so it didn't make it into the presentation, but Market Basket sells a 1 pound, maybe even 2 pound bag of mixed assorted nuts, no salt, which is really hard to find. Almost all of them are roasted and salted everywhere. So I quickly bought a bag.
Nuts in there too?
Yeah, not a lot. but they're not a
I'm
lot.
allergic to hazelnuts.
Oh, okay. Well, but take a look. They have the nut display at Market Basket is the place to be if you like unsalted things. So anyway, just kind of good to keep in mind. So, and this kind of goes to Alex's point, right? There isn't much point to becoming a vegetarian if you're only going to eat, crappy food. If you're only going to eat things that are in boxes and cans, or things that are, processed, or things that are, French fries. There's just no nutritional value there, none. But a vegetarian could claim to be vegetarian and go to McDonald's and just eat French fries all the time, and that would be a very unhealthy vegetarian.
You remember Jen Wardell?
I do. She was the classic example of that. Her lunch was a plate of her lunch. She was a vegetarian, and her lunch was a plate of French fries, with mayonnaise. So basic recipes. Let's talk about some basic recipes. So the very first one, you can't go wrong with a mixed vegetable stir fry. When I'm lazy, I just use frozen vegetables. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that because very often frozen vegetables have more nutrients than fresh vegetables. The fresh ones have been on a truck, they've been in a warehouse, they've been sitting under lights, all kinds of things have been going on where, the frozen stuff very often is frozen at the peak of freshness, peak of ripeness. Same thing is true of fish. Now they have these floating factories out that, they harvest the fish, they cut it, they, fillet it, and they freeze it right there on the boat. So you're getting something that's very fresh. The key with a veggie stir fry, and really the key with a vegetarian diet I have found is the seasonings and the spices. You need something to replace that, I'll use my cooking hat for a minute, that umami flavor that you get from, which umami is like a savory flavor that people get from meat. And I know I was used to that. And I get it. Soy sauce is a perfect example. I actually like Worcestershire sauce. I use Worcestershire sauce on a lot of stuff. Very high in sodium, but if you just use a little, you're okay.
You can get low sodium soy sauce.
Sure.
Too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then some customized options. You can, if you wanted to add a Mediterranean twist, you could add some olives or sun-dried tomatoes, which, by the way, are very flavorful. Really great way of flavoring up dishes. Sun-dried tomatoes, adding a lot of sweetness. And then you have the spicy chili flakes, sesame oil, things like that. You could do an Indian one. And this one is made so that the dish is actually made for a vegetarian. So it's rich in protein, fiber, and essential vitamins and nutrients. That would be, the broccoli, the bell peppers, things like that. So you're getting a complete meal here. You're getting everything you need. So the protein is coming from the tofu. Yeah. So a roasted veggie grain bowl, if you don't like tofu, roast some vegetables, very easy to do. Add some cooked grains. I use brown rice. I haven't jumped on the quote unquote ancient bandwagons, ancient grains bandwagon, but that's, you hear, ancient grains, well, they're all ancient grains, but whatever. If that's what you want to do, quinoa or farro or something like that, it's great. Chickpeas, black beans, they're very high in protein. Add some olive oil, use a little tahini or some hummus. And then again, if you wanted to add the different flavors, you could make it a Mexican-inspired dish, Greek-inspired, Indian-inspired. And then this one I love stuffed peppers, but again, I don't eat meat anymore. So, I've had turkey. I find, turkey's very dry, and turkey has a lot of cholesterol too. So I've ended up doing a lot of stuff like this, using the black beans as kind of the meaty part of it. Just put them in. I like the colorful bell peppers. I don't like green bell peppers. I find the red and the yellow. I find the green ones, I end up tasting them for the rest of the day. So let's look at some selected recipes. So the first one is, if you're going to be a vegetarian and you're going to be strict about it, this was one thing I learned, cooking for a vegetarian. You can't just grab boxed chicken stock off the, and use it because A, that they don't want meat, and B, I did that once and she noticed immediately. She was like, this is chicken broth. And that would happen to us on occasion. For example, we would go out, she loved clam chowder. And she would ask, is there any salt pork or bacon in the clam chowder? And almost every single time, oh, no. And every time she tasted it, and of course there was, because the chef would do it, but it's not on the menu because it's just something that they would do. Instead of olive oil, they would use the pork fat. But she could taste it after a while. So, you want to keep that in mind. So it's essential to make your own. It's too expensive to buy vegetables and make your own stock, with that way. So I keep the scraps, and I just, the ends of celery and carrots, the carrot peels, and potato peels work well. Don't use the potato itself. The peels work well. And the best thing I've ever done is butternut squash peels. If you've never used those in a stock, they add this velvety, like, smoothness to it that people really, really notice. It almost gives you that mouthfeel of a chicken stock, the vegetable. But again, only the peels, not the squash.
Do you roast the peels?
I don't roast any of them. Some people, you can, if you want a little more flavor. When I make a stock, if I make a chicken stock, I roast the chicken, but I never roast the vegetables. You can, though. You certainly can. Lots of people do. I prefer not to. A mushroom broth is another really great way, and this is one after my ex-wife Sarah. Instead of calling her ex-wife, I'll use her name, Sarah. She had probably been a vegetarian for about 2 years, and I asked her one day. I said, what do you miss the most? What's the number one? Because keep in mind, she gave it up for ethical reasons, so she still had enjoyed eating meat. So she thought about it, and she came back with beef stew. And I said, really? She said, yeah, like a fall day, a nice warm thing of beef stew, I really miss that. So I came up with this mushroom broth, and I made her a meatless beef stew. And what I did is I just used tofu in place of the meat, and I used this mushroom broth instead of a beef stock. And it came out fantastic. There's a lot of salt. If you do use the soy, the Worcestershire, and the fish sauce, that's a lot of salt. You could use none of it or just one of it. Originally, I had a teaspoon of each in there, and it was way too much. It was way too salty. So I changed it to a dash. The only thing is when you add the tofu and stuff like that, you probably need a little more salt if you're going to make the broth low salt, because the tofu will kind of take a little up.
Dash, if you buy it used to be Mrs. Dash, now it's just called Dash. It has so many spices and flavors in it. It's awesome.
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah, that's enough, and there's no salt in that too. The Dash, that's a great one. Yeah. So use that. You don't have to use that. You could use vegetable broth for this or whatever. But a mushroom and thyme soup, and we did one with sage too. So I remember, Peggy, you gave me all your sage last year, and awesome. we did the mushroom and thyme soup, and then we did butternut and apple with sage and coconut milk, which is fantastic. That's for the folks at home, that's in our fall soups presentation. A zucchini and white bean stew, I wanted to include something that, one of the things I hear from people, like if I serve a vegetarian dish to people that are used to meat, I'll hear, it doesn't stick to my ribs. It's not, I need something hearty. And so I wanted to include something like a bean type stew that's hearty. So that kind of satisfies this. Lentils, if you've been to any of our presentations, through the Therapy Gardens or Senior U, you know that we love lentils. They're, again, one of the most nutritious and healthy things you can possibly eat. Red lentils in particular work really well with soup because they break down, whereas the black and the green lentils hold their shape a little more. But you can see all the different, things that are in here, the different vegetables and things. A white bean and spinach soup. Spinach is a great way to get some calcium, some protein. The beans are, again, fantastic for you. There's a little bit of cheese in this one. So I use the rind of a Parmigiano Reggiano cheese rind, and I simmer that in the soup. And then you take it out just before you serve it, and it kind of infuses a nice little cheesiness into the broth. And if you forget to fish the rind out and you serve it to someone by mistake, you say, oh, you won. It's your lucky day. You got the rind. Do you think I've done that?
You have.
Hummus. Make hummus. It's so easy. You can use canned, although there's high sodium content. You could use dry, chickpeas. You just soak them overnight and cover them by about 2 inches of water, soak them overnight, and then they're ready to, use the next day. You just boil them a little bit. I made some homemade hummus, and I have a friend who's from Lebanon, and I brought some over to him. And I decorated it all up like that, and I was like, what do you think? And he tasted it, and he was like, oh, it's very good, very good. He said, but if you want it to be authentic, you have to pinch the skins off of each chickpea. I'm not doing that. So, but anyway, hummus, great way. As a matter of fact, Panera Bread has a vegetarian sandwich that they make that instead of mayonnaise, they use hummus. It's excellent. It's really, Mediterranean vegetable sandwich, it's called. This I started doing for, I had a 5-year-old that was coming to visit after school before his parents would come home. And I was trying to find, healthy snacks or something, but that, he wouldn't get mad about, that, that it's like broccoli, he would have known right away. So I did this roasted asparagus, and I just, snapped the ends so that they're tender. Drizzled them with a little bit of lemon juice and olive oil, and then I use Old Bay seasoning. I like Old Bay seasoning on a lot of different things, but particularly vegetables I use it on. I think it really works well. No salt. And then you just roast them. At 8 minutes, they're kind of a little crunchy, and at 10 minutes, they get a little, if you like them a little dark and a little bit crispy, which is how I like them. So that's a great way to do that. Great little snack to pop in the oven or something once in a while.
So he liked the asparagus?
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. Thought it was great. And he loved, not the next one, the one after this too. This is another one. This one, I used to call this half-baked eggplant parm because I used to saute the eggplants first just to brown them, and then I would assemble it and bake it the rest of the way. And then eventually I just did away with the sauteing, and I just bake it all the way through. But I like this shape, the little round. I cut them into discs. That was a new thing for me. When I had always seen eggplant, it had been cut lengthwise. So this is great because you can just kind of pick it up and serve it like one little stack. But for this one, you use the low sodium mozzarella and use some seasoned breadcrumbs just to get a little more flavor in there. This one, he loved this one too, right? You've had this, right, Peggy? This one, we served this at one of our lunch and learns. This is absolutely one of my favorite things, and it's so easy to make. Just get a whole head of cauliflower. That's what I do. Just cut the end off so the florets all fall apart, and then I just toss them in a little bit of olive oil, salt, pepper, smoked paprika, thyme, and I use a little minced garlic. You could use garlic powder if you wanted. You don't have to use the minced. I like the minced. And I just put it in a big bowl and mix it all up like that, and then roast it at 425 for 20 minutes, and it comes out exactly like that. It's phenomenal. It really is one of the better tasting things that I've found. So I always like to do a couple, I want to, do a couple like meal type things too, because, you notice, by the way, you didn't see much salad here. It's one thing I learned from my wife, my ex-wife Sarah, is we would be invited to weddings, and she'd be like, fish, chicken, or salad. She's like, that's always a salad choice for vegetarians, and there's more to food than salad. You have to put some thought into it. So I started doing that. So one of the things I mentioned earlier, red lentils are really good at getting mushy, but the green and the brown ones hold their shape, so they lend themselves to more like this. So use the lentils in place of meat. That's essentially what you're doing here. And all you do to cook lentils, and I know a lot of people don't use lentils regularly, is you can steam them, you can boil them, however you want to do it. And then they take, like I said, the yellow and the red ones will break apart a little quicker, and the green and the brown ones will get tender, take a little bit longer to get tender, but they won't break apart. And then you just drain them and use them as you want. Here's a sweet potato and black bean taco. Again, I'm looking for something a little bit different that you could serve as a filling main dish, And sweet potato is definitely one of those things that, you roast it, you can do whatever you want with it. But it's one of those, a filling thing that's still, relatively healthy for you. There are some carbohydrates still. The avocado gives you the omega-3s, things like that. More protein ideas, chickpea and quinoa. Tofu stir fry, you can just add a bunch of different things there. Lentil and spinach, we know what the good things are. Just put them together with some seasonings and you have a complete meal. All right, and then just a little bit about tofu, because I do know that a lot of people, particularly people our age, are kind of like, ugh, tofu, ugh. It's come a long way. It's much different. The tofu of today is different than it was even 20 or 30 years ago. It's a soybean, so it really is also called bean curd. It's made from soybeans that are soaked, ground, boiled, and pressed into solid blocks. So it's important to remember it is a processed food. And that's one of the things, that we talk about here is to what level of processing, is acceptable for people. So if you're a vegetarian, I would say this level of processing is pretty acceptable to you because it's how you're getting a lot of your protein, or most of it. You can get it in different textures. I primarily use extra firm. I don't think I've ever used soft for anything. I'm soft enough. And it can be decent when it's prepared with the right seasonings. When it's pan fried a little bit, maybe crispy on the outside with some of the seasonings, it can be pretty good. And then you have fortified tofu, and you'll see some recipes in a minute that call for this. And it's actually called calcium set tofu. For some reason they call it that. They could just say calcium added, but for whatever reason it's called calcium set. So it ends up giving you one serving, gives you about a third of your recommended day allowance for protein, or calcium rather. So, a broccoli and tofu stir fry, very easy to do. I tend to just put the tofu in first. Mine is usually a little browner than this, so I brown it a little bit more so it gets a little crispier, and then I throw the rest of the stuff in. Kale and almond salad, again, you're mixing the kales with the nuts that, we talked about, how to get the proteins that you need. Tofu and spinach, scramble, can be really good. Here's a way to get some of the chia seeds and the flax seeds into your diet, is put them into a little smoothie. That's always a really great way to do it. And then some of these I haven't had a chance to get pictures for, but nutritional yeast is a product that I recommend. I don't know if people are familiar with nutritional yeast, but it's a product that I recommend to people who are thinking about becoming vegetarians or are vegetarians. It's just another way. It's yeast that is grown to be edible. So it's not going to expand in you, or you're not going to have bread growing in you. It has a nutty flavor. A lot of people liken it to Parmesan cheese flakes. And that's kind of what it looks like. It looks like flaked cheese almost. I swirl it into soups. I put it in stews. I put it on roasted vegetables. And it adds, a little bit of flavor and a lot of nutrient for you. So, and it's very easy to swirl into things. It's low in sodium. It's low in fat. It has vitamin B12. Believe it or not, the fiber, and it can do what fiber does and help you lower cholesterol. Pretty important. It's a great source of protein for older adults. It gives you B12. It sounds like I'm selling people on nutritional yeast. The nutritional yeast people aren't paying me, believe me. But it's a really good product. So here's a cheese sauce you can make using nutritional yeast. I think the cashews were kind of interesting in that, but it does work. It's actually a really tasty sauce. And I personally put it on broccoli and it was great. So it's just some other quick tips before we wrap up. I always try to remember steam for nutrients, roast for flavor, saute using less oil, that's a big one. And bake for healthier options. Whenever you can bake as opposed to saute, it's usually better for you. This is my favorite thing. I include it in a lot of our presentations. You'll see it in the Mediterranean diet one. You'll see it in all different ones. But it's called the 30 Plants in 7 Days Challenge. And I do it probably 2 or 3 times a year. And I started doing it actually not to lose weight and not really to do anything with being a vegetarian. I actually did it for my gut health. And again, it was back when I was dealing with, I had a lot of gastrointestinal issues I was dealing with. And I was like, I've been reading about microbiomes and how we tend to get into eating ruts where we eat the same things over and over and over again. And the flora in our gut isn't as diversified as it could be. And it's not operating at peak efficiency. And there's a lot of studies about that can influence mental health. What's going on in your gut and your stomach can influence how you feel and react to things. So every, 2 or 3 times a year, I try to do this. And all it is eat 30 different plant-based foods in 7 days. And I just keep a list in my phone. It's fun if you do it with somebody and you can compare notes once in a while and be like, oh, I tried this. But by the time you get to the 20th, let's say, vegetable or fruit, you're in the grocery store scouring the aisle going, oh, rutabaga, I haven't had that, And it introduced me to a lot of different things. That's where the butternut squash peels ended up in my vegetable stock because I have a rule that I don't throw any peels or anything away. And I was like, what am I going to do with these vegetable peels? Because I was eating the butternut squash through this. But anyway, it's really great. It's a lot of fun, and it's one of the healthier things you can do. All right, and then, there are a lot of supplements out there, and there are some supplements as we age that we do need. So one of them, we know B12 for brain health. Again, we talked about mental acuity and things like that as you age. So look for fortified plant-based milk, B12 supplements, and then nutritional yeast. We talked about omega-3 fatty acids. If you don't eat fish, they're kind of hard to find. So you can find them in some of these sources, chia seeds, walnuts. Vitamin D, again, you want to get sunlight. It's pretty important to get you need 15, 20 minutes of sunlight a day.
Not according to my dermatologist. He says take a vitamin.
Okay, well, it can be indirect sunlight. It doesn't need, you don't have to be, that's very interesting that dermatologists say that, because indirect sunlight works. Sitting next to a window with that sunlight coming in works. So you can be under shade and still get sunlight because it's absorbed through your eyes. It's absorbed through, that's how you process the vitamin D. So it's not done through your skin. So it's your eyes that need to see the sun. I'm surprised that that wasn't brought up. Calcium, dark leafy greens. You can't go wrong. Spinach, kale, things like that. And that's where the tofu and maybe some calcium supplements might come in. So that's our presentation for today. I'm happy to, if you have any questions or topics that I didn't cover or things that you want to debate with me, I'd love to talk to you about it.
What about iron, especially for women?
So iron is something that I purposely have stayed away from because the research is really unclear about the difference between men and women with iron. Men can get too much of it, and it can be very dangerous. So I haven't been able to kind of parse that out in here. One thing I do recommend is, believe it or not, cooking in a cast iron pan.
There you go.
Can help.
My doctor recommends.
And it's a really easy way of doing it without overloading yourself with iron. That said, I have some elderly, and they're all men, friends, who have, the typical cast iron pan that sits on their stove and they use it for every single meal every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They fry their bacon in it and they leave the fat in it, and then they fry their hamburgers in it at night and they leave the fat overnight. That would be an unhealthy way to do it. Yeah, exactly. So that would be an unhealthy, but if you use a cast iron pan properly, absolutely, that's the answer. So, all right, great. All right, thank you very much for coming. Very good. Thank you. Thanks.